Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and we're here to interview the game changers, the future makers, the co-collaborators and creators who are here to collaborate with one another towards a better future for all of us. Enjoy the show. We've got a great guest coming up for you right now. Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and I'm here today with Nancy Duarte. Hello, Nancy. Welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me.
From sunny Santa Clara, California, down here in San Diego. We're just doing the California thing. I'm loving it. Thank you so much for being here. Nancy, for the people at home that might not be familiar with your work and what you're doing in the world, can you kind of catch us up a little bit, talk about your heroine's journey, if you will?
Yeah. So I have a firm here that we write and produce and help you deliver a great talk. We'll either do it for you or we'll train you how to do it for yourself. So next year's our 30-year anniversary, and we entered into this niche in 2000 when Jim Collins' book Good to Great came out. We had been already in business for almost a decade, and in that book he said, if there's one thing you can do, you can be profitable at, be passionate about, do just that one thing. And so we shuttered the doors on all of our services and decided to niche ourselves in presentations. So that was a real defining moment for us. And we'd been doing presentations for quite some time, but we decided to have that be the only thing we do. And then I wrote my first book in 2008, which was amazing. And it's been a fun ride. We love what we do. And the dirty little secret is that I actually got a C- in speech communication and a D in English, and now I write books in English about speech communications. And I think it just put in me first it felt like, I don't know, the scarlet letter, right? Running around with this big mark on me that I was a failure at public speaking. But I think based on kind of my childhood and how resilient I had to be, I just made it a goal to obliterate that perception and create a great presentation company. So that's the story.
I love it, Nancy. And I really appreciate that you kind of peppered it with some failures too, because I think everybody can relate to failure, but not everybody can relate to success. And it's definitely more endearing when people have a sense of what you come from and what you've kind of gone through.
Yeah, I could take the whole time talking about failure if you want.
Yeah, we could just pick out a few fun ones. As long as they're educational and informative, why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really believe in failure. I kind of reframed it. It's either you win or you learn. What did you win? What did you learn, right?
That's fair. That's fair. Unless you die in the process, then it's too late.
Well, that's going to happen regardless. So I guess
Yep.
that's kind of across the board. Can we talk a little bit about growing your organization from a leadership perspective, what you had to learn and fail at along the
Yeah.
way? That's where you're at.
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, you tend to be a generalist, like you could be good at a lot of things. So I would say when we were at about 30 people, I was the hub and everyone was a spoke off of me. And I would come in, I mean, literally to the point where I would resketch the decks of the customers that came in, and people would come in with a little pile of paper and they knew what to do that day. I mean, that's how like I made myself kind of the central figure. And I remember my best friend in the world, he worked at a big corporation. He's watching this happen and watching me kind of implode. I just couldn't take any more on. And I hired him. And he came in, and first thing he did for the first few months was just observe me. And then he started to write these job descriptions. Each job description he would write, and I would go home with it. And I remember just kind of mourning the loss of that role, because I knew if I clung to that role, I would want to control or influence the person doing it. And so I had to kind of like, this role is dead to me, and just completely realize that we were going to hire someone better at this role than I could ever be, like a specialist in that role. And that was the first step in setting myself free. And then I brought in a president too, because to be kind of a creative force, an innovative force, and also be an operational force just wasn't wise. And so brought in a leader. And I think part of the promise of working for Duarte is we create a place where you can find meaning because you belong. So we have a strong sense of community and belonging and creativity, and kind of playing like a championship team. And it's been important as I've grown and as the company's grown to try to help facilitate and manage that culture and create an owner's mindset in everyone. And it ebbs and flows. Like I could say some years sometimes I feel I'm killing it as a leader, and some years it feels like, it's eating me alive. And I think it comes in waves. And like you said, you win and you lose, and you pick yourself up and you make yourself stronger. And I think that's a key point of being a leader. I think too, I have this almost, maybe for lack of a better word, almost the supernatural ability to see the future. So I feel like I can see really, really clearly about 18 months ahead, both the industry, the market, my team. So I could see pretty clearly the unknown and the direction we need to go. And sometimes I've been good at rallying my team to get us there. Sometimes we've kind of missed the mark, but I do feel like we're, in general, always headed at least into the right hemisphere. I can't promise we're always going to hit the letter X, but I do feel like we're always kind of headed in the right direction.
Yeah, you don't always have to hit it right the first time, but you do have to hit it right eventually. And if that's the intention, you keep changing your approach, you'll eventually get there. I really like a few of the things you just said, and I want to dig into them. I'll start pulling on the threads until the sweater unravels and reveals the naked truth. But when you said setting yourself free and excommunicating yourself from the role, can you expand on how that looks from a practical and tactical standpoint? Because that's something that I know I've struggled with. I know people listening at home, like when you're an entrepreneur and a generalist and you're like a 3 out of 4 or 5 or something, and you go to
Yeah.
delegate it, do you really ever, can you ever really let it go? And then like, there's always that battle between, do we have the revenue for this? And how do we create more sales so that we can actually do it? And growing a profitable company is more important than just growing a company. It doesn't matter if you make a million and lose 999,000 to expenses. So, what are some of the things that you've had to do to really get clear on that? And
Yeah, it is weird. I think as an entrepreneur, many of us are systems thinkers, and we can see the dependencies like, oh, if I pull this thread, it's going to unravel this, or all of those kinds of things. And I feel like what has happened for me was that, hello, I mean, there's a lot of people who could storyboard a presentation better than I could. And so there was low hanging fruit that were easier to let go for me. As I've built now what I would call a truly professional executive team, what happens is there'll be a problem on the table, and instead of giving them a chance to fail, I will scoop up and jump in and matrix out this big fat problem that they're trying to do it, and they're like, okay, we know you're capable, but let go, and so I'm having to let go now at a more strategic level, which is harder for me than Nancy, stop storyboarding everybody's presentation. That's very different level. And I'm totally energized by strategic problem solving. So now it feels like it's starting to cut into my meaty core. And so now I'm having to find kind of the place for myself. And I'm having to take an inventory of what really truly energizes me, and then get to the point where I don't care about, a misstep here or there, so I'm still learning, because now the stuff I'm having to let go of some of my favorite things, and that's different.
mm,
That's different.
that's where I really get excited is like, you can own 50 businesses with the same amount of energy and time and attention it takes to run
Exactly.
one effectively. So,
Exactly.
when you get to that level where it's like, I love this thing, it's my baby, I built it from the ground up, but it's time to let it fly.
Yeah.
And then from that place, what do you do next? And what does that look like for you?
It's fun because I do tend to make up business models for fun. The space we're in, has varying degrees of quality, varying degrees of insights you need to be able to be an effective presenter. So it's been really fun. So what I do is I invent other little businesses and ideas. I think I definitely obsess about the future, and how do we meet our clients there at the right place. So we actually we had an agency, a creative services firm for years. And so then we built a training company, which is a product based business, which was kind of fun. So I went from a service based to a product based. At one time, we even had a t-shirt company, and now we're looking at some other models to service kind of the lower end of the market. We are in the valley. It's expensive to employ people here. I do think I have the smartest thinkers in the world, but it's pricey. And so now I'm having to come up with super interesting. As much as I hate the valley sometimes, it's forcing me to stay strategically smart. It's forcing me to do very counterintuitive things, forcing me to take big, big risks that I'm only having to take because I live here. So when I travel around the world, I'll tell people like, oh, this is on my mind and this is on my mind and this. And they're like, yeah, y'all in California, y'all are cray cray. And nobody else is having to think that way. And the only reason you have to think that way is because you're in the valley. So it's like, it's true, but I also don't think I would be anywhere else. Like it's making me stay really sharp strategically. So we're having to do some really clever things, and it kind of that part energizes me. It's just empowering other people to do the the execution of it that you know that's hard for me.
Yeah, and that's always the leadership dilemma. I mean, I spent a lot of time in and out of Silicon Valley. I used to live in San Francisco about 6 years ago now. Wow. And what I've always noticed is that's like the bleeding edge. It's kind of the meat grinder a little bit,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
like
Meat
everybody's
grinder. That's a good
fighting
word.
for the opportunities that are the future. And you mentioned this two or three times, so we're going to dig into that as well. Um, what do you see coming that's going to change your industry? What are you really excited about just
Yeah,
across industries that's going to change the way that we live? Because
yeah,
we're focused on building better systems that serve more people, right? There's an
yeah,
old Winston Churchill saying, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Well, the same could be said for capitalism and a lot of other systems
yeah.
that, while they're the best we have now, I think we can do better in the future. And what does that look like? So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the future and what we're looking forward to.
Yeah, it's funny right now, kind of the norm in the Silicon Valley is you just throw billions of dollars at ideas and somebody will get filthy rich. And there's not a lot of meaning in that. There's not a lot of it's only a handful of people that get astronomically
Yeah,
rich.
it's not efficient for sure.
No, and that bothers me, right? I don't have $1 billion to throw around and just kind of throw it like seeds into the wind and see if anything germinates from it. So I think there's some imbalance here. I think that a small firm like mine can bring more meaning and familial spirit to it. But a lot of companies like mine are getting squished out, they're leaving. I think the trends that I see that are going to impact my business, we're actually trying to set. We did a series of labs where we spent 2 different summers where I had 11 labs each summer, and we all dreamed about in 40 years, how are we going to present? What's the presentations of the future look like? Almost every single lab came up with a software idea. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to be CEO of a software company. And it scared me. And so I befriended a bunch of women that ran billion-dollar software companies. And
As you do.
yeah, as you do when you live in the valley. And what was interesting to me is it takes a different temperament. Like I love creating beautiful content that changes lives. Software is that's not that, you know. And as I got to know them and they got to know me, we're investing and inventing, but I don't feel like I'm the one that will run it. The things that I think are going to impact my business is I believe right now presentations are still one of the last hierarchical things. It's one person presenting one directionally to the masses, right? And I think that there's opportunity for there to be a solution where the audience can be a participant, not like polling and all this stuff, but really helping drive the narrative. I think AR, more than VR, will affect us. I met with a guy at Fidelity, and he's like, oh yeah, we just filed a patent, and it made me so mad because we didn't file it first. But he's like, yeah, you could be sitting in a presentation with your VR glasses on and going through a 401k presentation, and what you'll see in your glasses when a slide comes up, you'll see your own data privately in your own glasses. I'm like, crap, how come I didn't patent that?
Smart.
Yeah, it's just smart. There's just smart thinking. So we came up with a bunch of ideas, and we do have a patent in the mix. And it's weird, right? We're a services firm having to file patents, but that's kind of the nature of being here and being in the valley, I think. So there's things coming up and things that we want to drive that will, I think, shape the future of how people present.
And Nancy, is Duarte venture backed or is it bootstrapped or how does it work?
Bootstrapped, 100% owned.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
No, it's rare, especially in the Valley to have a
Well,
bootstrap
what's
company.
funny is it's not sexy here. Like everyone's like, "What do you mean you own? You shouldn't own that. You shouldn't
Because
own your."
raising money is a business model to them. It's crazy. They don't have a product or
I
a service.
know.
Some users
Yeah.
maybe.
So
Like,
my husband worked all summer long, 1988, to buy a little Mac Plus, and we had terrible yellow shag carpet, and we lived in a one-room apartment. We were probably the only people in a 2-mile radius that owned a personal computer, right? And we've just poured every spare bit of cash back into our own business. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
I
And that
think
just
so.
shows
I'm
that
glad you think so
entrepreneurship
because
isn't
people.
dead. It's making something out of nothing, but it's hard to compete when people have so much money that may or may not be being wasted. But
Yeah.
and there's this excess, like you talked about, throwing seeds into the wind. some of those seeds are going to land on fertile
fallow
soil.
ground.
Those
Yeah.
lands are gonna, yeah, not so much. Um, what do you think every single entrepreneur should know? Like, if you had a microphone just that went straight into the ears of every entrepreneur in the world, what would you be telling them?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur, you're high probability of already being resilient. Resilience. I mean, I take less than 2 hours to get over something. I mean, you just have to be like, okay, yeah, that was really stupid, but learn from it. And I think you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to you have to constantly know what's going on, constantly invest in yourself. I read probably 50 books, read and listen to about 50 books a year. So I think you have to be really well read, really resilient. But I think one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs are missing is empathy and storytelling. Just to kind of wrap my own view around it. It's taken me a long time to understand empathy because when you start as an entrepreneur, you have complete control. You can just shove things down people's throats or control them along the way. But when you're in a startup mode or you're in a quick growth mode, like we have a department now that is practically like a startup, it's easier to go to command and control instead of actually really using empathy as a leadership device, even in a high growth, a high impact part of the business. So yeah, it's not easy, and then I think what we started with was letting go. I think that we are our own limiters of growth because we think we have it all in control. And I think control is our biggest enemy. And we need to learn to empower others that are smarter than ourselves. I feel I've actually hired people smarter than myself. I just have a control problem. That's all.
And that's the really important thing to understand is that if you're the bottleneck through which everything needs to pass,
Exactly.
you know
Exactly.
what are you going to do when you run out of time, energy, and attention, or get
Yeah.
jacked up on cortisol so much you can't even breathe? Taking my own advice. Taking my own advice. So
I'm
you
not a
mentioned,
control freak. I don't think my exec team would say I am, but that's my big development area, I think.
at least you're aware of it, and that's the first step. You mentioned that missing empathy and storytelling was a big part of what's plaguing a lot of entrepreneurs. And I heard a quote somewhere. It was something to the effect of the best and most effective influencers, leaders, persuaders, marketers are the most empathetic people in the world. And
Hmm.
I don't know if you believe what I believe, which is these are all tools, and just like a hammer can build a house and feed a family and do all that kind of stuff, or it can cave somebody's skull, and it's the wielder of the hammer that is the most important thing. How do you feel like people get it wrong, like when they use some of these leadership skills in the wrong way or to influence? I mean, there's tons of news, and I don't want to get political about it, but especially in Silicon Valley, we're seeing so many companies with leadership that you know through their own ability or skill or talent or luck, right place at the right time, they've gotten so much power, and then they're wielding it ineffectively. And what do you see as the path to create that balance again and leadership?
I
Or does
think
anybody care enough to do it? I guess that's
uh,
the other question.
yeah, I think the old adage winds up ringing true that pride cometh before a fall. And I do think that eventually the bad leaders or the ones that were only there at the right time, like there's some people I know who like miss the right time by 2 seconds, 25 different times, and they deserve and have earned some of the privileges that some of these wee pups. It's funny, I'm an old lady, I've been around for 30 years, and some of these young guys, sorry, but I'm saying guys because those tend to be the ones, show up like they know better than I do, which maybe they do. Treat you like crap, ask you to lie. That's my favorite. I just can't even believe what's expected or what's requested um, from this new type of leader that's pervasive here. And I do think that what goes around comes around. I think kindness and empathy. 30 years. I mean, I don't even know. Like Google, it's not even been around. Apple's barely been around that long, right? And I think it takes resilience. I think it takes truthfulness, transparency. Empathy has been my lifelong journey on a personal level because I was raised by a bipolar alcoholic narcissist, which was hard. My mom didn't even know I existed, let alone knew what I was doing any time of day or believed in me or anything. And And I think that my own quest for understanding empathy, there's research done that daughters of narcissistic mothers, it's you have to really make it a lifelong discipline to learn empathy. And I feel like all of my body of work were models that I needed for myself as a leader and as a communicator to empathetically understand who I'm trying to lead. And the cycle, I hope the cycle's broken. I've worked hard on it. My children aren't narcissists. You could tell that they're turning out. Oh my God, my children, they're turning out. They're adults and they've turned out. Um, but we'll see, the spawn of these leaders, we'll see how they turn out, and it's a weird place. It's a weird place. And I think some of the downfalls are kind of deserved. It sounds terrible.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of interesting to think this has happened a lot of times if you study human history. Like, for example, just to pick one, anytime there's like a huge leverage increase on one side or a huge technological increase, that tends to be used very effectively to subjugate another
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Like, for example, the Europeans coming to North America and taking land from the Native Americans. And I think that's kind of happening on a smaller scale, not so much with the
yeah,
wars and everything that are going on, although it certainly does. It's more of a Cold War nowadays and more of a global economy. But in the Silicon Valley, in the tech space especially, it's like, we have these people that are rising up because they found that niche first and they dominated it, right?
mhm,
And then they abuse their power and things get out
yeah.
of whack for a while, and then it kind of comes back to a balance.
I
And
hope
I think
so.
that just hasn't quite happened yet, right? We've seen some cycles of it and up and down. And I just think that's a human thing. I don't know if that's ever going to really change, but I do feel like the cycles will get shorter because the leverage and like there's so many more people talking to each other,
Yeah,
just the way that people are evolving through communication and being connected. It just in the last 5 years has been insane to me. Like, I'm having
yeah.
conversations with people I've never met before from an entirely different culture. We have the same memes. We have the same kind of, um, we've seen the same videos. We've talked
Yeah,
about the same
it's
problems with the
true.
same people. We're having like it's actually really encouraging, and you may not see it in the meat grinder every day, but
I
I
got
think
too much
overall,
sausage in the meat
right?
grinder all around me. I can't see it.
Uh,
I don't want to be,
no, I know,
beating on
I
the
get it.
valley because
But
my
you've been dealing
business
with this for
also.
30 years, and I
I've been
understand because
dealing with
now
it. Yeah,
just
but
now the similarity starting, and
I
you've been
know.
seeing these little 1% increments, and now we're starting to really globally take off, and it's kind
Well,
of cool.
I also don't know that I would have had the success we've seen if I wasn't planted here, So I want to honor that too. Before this was called the Silicon Valley, it was called the Valley of the Heart's Delight. That's because it was so plentiful with fruit and orchards. And my father-in-law, who is of Mexican descent, who used to live very close to the border, they used to drive their cars up here and pick the fruit in Santa Clara Valley. And it was the Valley of the Heart's Delight. And now it still is. It's just the fruit that we pick as ideas instead of actual fruit. And I just kind of always want to remember that this has been a place of plentiful for a long time. And to your point, when something new emerges, something else obsolesces. And so I just want to always make sure I harness what's new and then kind of let go of whatever it is that gets obsolesced in the making of new things.
Nancy, you mentioned you read a lot of books, and I do too. What are some of the books that are really just, the best ones you've read this year? And who are the thought leaders that you really look up to and respect?
Yeah, so I'm reading one, which I just started it. I'm halfway through in one night. I think it's called Ownership Thinking. That one is just rocking me. I'll have to look at my phone. I just ordered a whole new handful too. I've loved, I finally this year finally read Geography of Thought, which was super, super interesting. It just my third time through The Power of Habit. I'm
Charles
reading,
Duhigg. Yeah.
yeah, I'm reading a lot of books on scaling right now. Monetizing innovation was super interesting to me. These are the top firm that just determines pricing strategies. They have 900 employees, and they kind of codified it in a book because we're releasing a digital version of a lot of our training and learning, and it gave me a methodology for how to know how to price things. And then my leadership team is going through different versions of emotional intelligence and Patrick Lencioni's work. And then one of my other favorite books was called Never Split the Difference. It's the FBI hostage negotiator. That whole
Hmm.
book was on empathy, which was so fun. I loved reading that. And then, Hillbilly Elegy, just all those classic ones. Payoff by Dan Ariely didn't get as much visibility that I thought it should. I thought Third Wave by Steve Case was super interesting too, where the first couple waves, there was the technology wave and then the internet wave, like that Facebook and all these and LinkedIn could be opportunistic about, but that this next wave of innovation is so heavily regulated that it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to take years instead of months now. And I thought that was super
Much more
insightful.
entrenched systems too.
Much
We're
more,
getting
yeah,
the low hanging
finance,
fruit is kind of
health, yeah,
quick. Yep. And now there's
exactly,
a lot of power that needs to be like you
exactly,
can't just innovate around the power structures that exist, right? Because ultimately
exactly,
people control them, and those people really like controlling them, and they have for a long time. So they're not going to go quietly into that good night, as they will say.
right.
Uh, but yeah, that's actually really fascinating, and thank you for the having that just ready to rock because I just wrote them
Yeah,
all
and
down. Looking through
Reid
these.
Hoffman's. Have you listened to Reid Hoffman's new podcast too?
No, I'd love to check it
Scaling
out.
Up. Oh my God, it is so good. It's so well produced. The gal who used to run all of media for Ted June Cohen produces his podcast, and he's interviewing all the top people in the Valley. It's very, very good. Very well created, written, and produced.
I've been interviewing more and more tech CEOs. I had Lynn Perkins from
Huh.
Urban City on the show. You know Lynn?
Uh, don't know her
Yeah,
personally, but definitely know.
I'd love to connect you. I think you guys would really hit it off. Anyway, so I've been interviewing more of these wonderful tech CEOs and Silicon Valley CEOs, and just the level of thinking is just so much different than the
Hmm.
average entrepreneur. And I have to say, it's refreshing and at the same time a little intimidating, if I'm being honest. I don't ever think I'll be a tech CEO, or do I necessarily want to be? Although I've had offers. And one of the things that I think really sets you guys apart, you guys, I mean, I'm from Long Island, so I don't mean you
No, I
guys
know,
like
I know. I say you guys,
you guys over here. Um,
y'all. You can say y'all.
exactly, exactly. You seem to have this, like, you're just trying to get to the right answer as quickly as possible. Your
Yeah,
feelings be damned, right? Just get to the right answer
yeah.
as quickly as possible. And the less I can feel about it and just get there, the better I'll feel overall. And that's like the feeling I get whenever I talk to somebody. It's just like, I'm totally cool. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Just help me get to the right answer as
Yeah.
quickly as.
Just tell me the truth, straight up to my face. Yeah.
And where's
That's,
the best coffee shop in the next
yeah.
3 blocks? Please, yeah, we get there too.
It's funny. I avoided, there's these little tiny little female networks, where females can get together. And I always was like, I don't want to get to the top because I'm a chick. I want to get to the top, because I've worked. And finally I conceded. I met this little vein of these women that have become my tribe, and you get a bunch of us in a room, it's like a friggin' head house. We're all like, and you shouldn't do that, you should do that, the best coffee's over here, and the best, like, it's just crazy. And the value I've gotten from these chickadees in the hen house has been unparalleled. Like it, and I can see now why, a lot of men have these informal networks and they golf together and they do all these things together. Now it's like, dang, we get the same amount of insights, but it only takes us like an hour because we're
Right. Well,
just
y'all
so,
can multitask. We get
yeah,
back
it's
to
hysterical.
the singular
It,
focus.
it is hysterical. We have a
You
ton
know,
of fun.
I had the pleasure of meeting Sarah Blakely. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, she's amazing.
nice.
Back in February, I want to say, down in
Wow.
Atlanta, and her and her husband Jesse, just I love them both. Anyway, so Sarah said something that hit me right between the eyes. She says, "Female entrepreneurs are the most underutilized resource on the planet
Yeah,
right now." I was
I
like,
agree.
all right,
Yeah.
and I've really since then taken more effort and put a lot of people to work trying to find, the best top people such as yourself who, happen to be female and are just crushing it and doing their thing and, you know, drawing those kind of conclusions. And what's disappointing is that as hard as I try, it's still only about 1 out of 5 that I meet, that I interview. And
A lot of
I
them
was,
are hidden. It's weird, or there's a lot of demands, right? Because we also tend to run the household and do all these things. And so a lot of women that you'll meet now are kind of on the other side of childbearing. They're empty nesters, and then now they're just finally have the bandwidth in their schedule to talk about what got them to where they are.
but you were always an entrepreneur throughout your entire raising your children. How old are your kids now?
Yeah. 31 and 27.
Okay, so I'm the same age as your 31-year-old, 32.
Yeah,
And so the whole time you were a CEO,
yeah,
during the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s,
yeah.
late 80s, I guess. Now you're also a mom. Like, could you talk to that experience? Because that
Yeah.
just seems to pull in a lot of directions. I didn't have kids or a family or anything, and I'm still all pulled in a bunch of different directions. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate. So my husband started the business and he kind of let me take it over and turn it into what I wanted. So that was kind of wise on his part. But I would say you could probably hear it in my dialogue. I'm very future focused. My husband is very present past focused, right? So he is in the face of the kids. He's very today. He's, and that really helped. And so he's always had a role where he had the flexibility. He could pick them up. He could do these things. So I didn't travel and speak until I was an empty nester. And there's these moments where you feel guilty, where you go like on a deadline and I go 2 days without seeing my kids. And sometimes I would just come home and I remember I would like go into the living room and just kind of cry in the carpet so it would muffle so that I wouldn't wake up the kids because I'm such a bad mom. I didn't see my kids for 48 hours. I'm a failure. And I was just on the tail of a big event and it had been Mother's Day and all these, and I didn't get to see my own kids on Mother's Day. It was this big, anyway. And when it was all done, I was in the kitchen having breakfast with my daughter, and I said, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm letting you down. I'm just not here enough. And she's like, you have to know my daughter. She's, Mom, I can learn how to cook from the Food Network stars. Like, I don't need to learn how to bake from you. She's like, you have taught me how to lead and how to communicate, and that's more important. Like, I was just like, wow, that was kind of mature. I got over my guilt like that, and I never felt guilty again because both my kids have watched us. They're both entrepreneurial. They're both following their dreams. They're both following their passion. They both know how to love deeply, and yeah, I mean, I was there most of the time, but there were times where my job came first, and I feel like we made resilient children who see the value of hard work. Like both my kids, they're like, "Yep, we don't want your company. We want to go through the same hard work you went through. So we
Wow.
we get the same character that you built while you had to build your own thing." Like I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess."
God bless. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. They're like, "Oh, I guess we don't know what to do now." So we have to figure that out. Yeah.
So what are they getting into? What are they excited about?
My daughter is a high school science teacher. She wins all these awards. She's so out of the box, and she just procreated. I had my first grandson. He's
Congratulations.
Yeah. So they were married 11 years, had a baby, and my son is quite a bit of a genius. He is a classical composer. He won an
Oh,
ASCAP award when he was only 16 years old. Finished. Um, um, Finished at the conservatory and then got way into mechanical engineering, and so now he is a designer of heart valves at Boston Scientific. Loves it.
wow. Typical slacker,
Just a
basically.
tip. Yeah, he's crazy. He has this weird hobby. Actually, Walt Disney, I hate to say weird, but it's cute as can be, unless he's looking for a girlfriend. It's not so cute, but he builds these replicas of live steam engines. So like Walt Disney had these big tracks in their backyard. Like he literally orders prints of actual trains from the museum and then he scales them down and builds them. So he has his own shop too. So he builds heart valves and builds toy trains. That's what he does.
I
Loves
love
it.
it.
He's
Beautiful.
happy. He's super happy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cute. Yeah. He's
Let's switch gears.
attractive until you see him sitting on a train. Then you're like,
Poor girls. They didn't know what they're missing.
mm-hmm.
But he'll find the one that loves him for that. So
That's what I'm telling him.
let's kind of switch gears a little bit. So besides crying into the carpet, what are some of the other ways you practice self-care, manage anxiety and cortisol, adrenaline, all these wonderful chemicals that just turn our prefrontal cortex off and make us go, ah, as
Yeah.
entrepreneurs?
I hike, and there's this moment when you're hiking. It takes about an hour for me where my brain finally turns off. So on a hike, I'll create world peace in my head, right?
Mm.
I'll
Great
solve.
start.
Yeah, exactly. Like I solve every problem at the company, every problem at home. You just solve it all, and then all of a sudden, it gets quiet, and that's what I hike until it's like quiet and there's no
Mm.
noise and there's just white space. That's my favorite thing. My husband and I definitely are disciplined in prayer, which is super helpful. And one of the best things that has happened to me is getting an assistant, man. She is in my inbox. She saves me so much time. So a lot of people are like, oh, wow, you're busy. It's like, I'm not busy, I'm protected. Like today, I had 6 hours to write. Tomorrow, I have 4 hours to write. Next day, I have 2 hours to write. You know what I mean? So she blocks out my day. And yeah, it might take 6 months to get on my calendar, but that's because I have an enormous amount of time for me to sit and think. So getting an assistant who manages me and protects me from myself was
Mm.
probably one of the best things that I've ever done. I mean, I think she and I should write a book because how she works and makes time for me is really impressive. how I
that's amazing.
utilize her. Yeah.
Yeah, and just thinking about it, it's like you can't go after a fire and you can't be like squirrel if you don't see the fires. If she sees them first and
Exactly.
she's not emotionally attached to them, because I know I'm like a
Exactly.
dog with a bone. That's actually really good. So
Yeah.
if I was to put together the story arc from what I've gleaned over the last few minutes we've been talking, it kind of started as, all right, you got really clear on the one thing that you're going to do. You went good
Yeah.
to great, right? And then you
Yep.
started nailing that. And I'm sure you sold the crap out of it because you're bootstrapped, right? That's the best way to raise money, is to use other people's lines of credit and pocketbooks.
No,
And
we've never gone into debt either.
exactly. And just you
Yeah.
went and sold and you raised the money to have the people you needed. And with that space that you created, now you can, hire people that are better at you,
Yeah.
better than you at jobs, and then also have the protection that you need to really focus and be a leader. Am I
Yes.
getting the arc kind of right there? Is there
That's
any people
very
that
good.
you feel are appropriate or necessary? Because I want to bootstrap a company too, man. I want to do it right, and I'm sure people listening to you as well.
I know. I always wonder, like, if you've created something of incredible value, why would you give that much of it away, or give control away? I was super admirable of Zuckerberg to retain enough control to stop development and
He's
funnel
definitely
all the.
not the norm. He's definitely the
Yeah,
exception. Yeah.
yeah, it was smart. So yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
was
it
pretty much the
doesn't have
arc.
to be equity either. Like he doesn't necessarily own all that equity. He just owns the control and the voting rights, and that's
Exactly,
really what's
exactly.
important.
It's the only way
And
to
you
be
can say it was
agile.
a little Machiavellian the way he did it, if you believe,
Yeah,
Aaron Sorkin's rendition. But at the same time, the results. That's history is written by the winners, as they say.
yeah,
Um,
it's true.
so, okay, Nancy, what I just want to say first and foremost, I'm mega grateful that you're here. What would you really love to leave the audience? And we're talking to people who are entrepreneurs, we're talking to people who are investors and philanthropists, because we really believe that you need a way to generate money, grow money, and give it away. Because if you think money can't buy happiness, well, you probably haven't given enough away yet. What are some of the ways that you are doing that in your life? And then also, what is some of the advice that you have, not just from the entrepreneurial perspective, but now, okay, I got a pile of money or I want to give some away, and what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's funny. We're working through that. My husband and I, we met when we were really young. I was 16. He was 18. I got married when I was 18. And ever since we met, we've given away 10% of all of our increase. And so we still do that to this day. And 1% of the company's profit, which at Google is hundreds of millions. For us, it's not hundreds of millions, but a lot of the employees find a lot of meaning there. And we're trying to figure out what does it look like? What does Duarte 2.0 look like? This next year, we're going to start Duarte.org. We're starting a foundation where we can actually go into kind of the outermost parts of the earth where these struggling nonprofits are, teach them how to be better communicators, teach them how to get just, if you think about it, you could have this brilliant idea, and if you communicate it poorly, it'll get no traction. And some dork with a dorky idea gets traction just because how they communicated it. So we want to send my team out to some of the biggest causes that aren't getting traction and really teach them to be stronger communicators. And so I don't know, this is 30 years and it just feels like such a milestone to us. We built a big video studio training space, and it's called the Story Place. And we want to be the broadcasters of some of the greatest stories. I don't know what that means yet, but I think there's stories here to tell in the Valley that don't get any attention. I mean, I think some of the greatest stories don't make the headlines here. And I think there's a lot to be said here by the people who are not that much like the Valley, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. But we have decided that we're in a season that we're calling generous experts. We're experts that we want to do, but we're trying to democratize it as much as
Mm,
we can and make it accessible to as many people as we can. And that's the goal right now.
I love it. And the way you communicate is fascinating. And that's really the keystone to everything, especially in the modern age where the average person can, get in touch with pretty much anybody they want. Case in point, here we are on a podcast chatting, um,
Chatting it
you
up.
know, chatting it up. You talked about this, what was it, the story place? Is that what you called
Yeah,
it?
it's called the Story Place. It's
I
totally
want to
cool.
come and play in the story place. That
It's a
sounds
very
amazing.
beautiful room, and it even says this big sign. It's about a 10-foot sign says the Story Place. And story is the best way to bond. It's the best way to connect. It's the best way to persuade. Because when we observe a story or are part of a story, we're transformed. We're changed,
Mm,
and that's just such a part of what we do. All of the presentations we make, we overlay a story filter and story structure to them, and it's really gripped me in how much it can transform my life and transform content. So, yeah, it's going to be kind of cool. We have like a lot of announcements coming next year in our 30th year. It'll be fun.
I can't wait to hear about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Nancy, I just want to say how grateful I am for you being here and for
Oh,
sharing your wisdom and over many, many years that you've accumulated it. I'm grateful because, I really feel like people need more access to the ones that have come before and really set the stage for what the world is today so that they can pick up that mantle and take it to the next level, wherever that's going to go. So one of the ways we help to do that at Make More Marbles, right? We're all about helping people to connect to resources, opportunities, people, systems to help them move their mission forward faster. So I'm going to
cool.
kind of put you on the spot here and ask you how we can do that for you. If myself or anybody listening has an idea for you.
Wow. I love to hear ideas. I do connect to everyone that connects me on LinkedIn. I actually do get to the bottom of my inbox every week. Um, so I don't know. I think if anyone has ideas about what kinds of stories they'd like to hear out of the Valley, or what kinds of stories the world needs to hear right now, I'm kind of really working on that. I have another beautiful body of work I'm writing right now on storytelling through data, finding narrative in the data. So if anyone has interesting data points that they've struggled to communicate, I want to find some struggles people have had, and suss out the stories and frame it in a story through storytelling. So that's interesting to me too. I just like to connect to people. Like I said, I connect to anyone who connects to me on LinkedIn, which is fun.
Wonderful. And is LinkedIn the best way to reach out, just to send you a
Yeah.
connection?
Or Duarte.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, all the channels.
And that's DUARTE.com for people
Yes,
listening at home. Okay.
Duarte.com.
Wonderful. And Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any parting words to the audience?
Not well, except they probably all know I could be your mother because I, have a 31-year-old daughter. And I'm telling everyone that's listening, the 50s are my favorite decade. So
50's
I
the
would
new 30,
say
maybe, right?
50s the new 30. No, I just think I think so many people don't live life to their fullest,
Mm,
and I know that if you can shed yourself of any sort of victim mindsets, or the world is happening to me, this is happening to me, this is happening to me, and overcome any mental and emotional obstacles, I still think this is America. We also have access to the American dream. You're talking about a Mexican and a female with only a high school degree, and we've accomplished so much. So it's really easy for me, anyway, for you to believe me when I say, really, 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 you can be and do anything that you dream. It just takes a lot of persistence and resilience.
thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for being here. On
Thank
behalf of everybody at Make More Marbles, we're grateful for you.
thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Make More Marbles podcast. For more tips, hacks, and strategies to create an amazing, abundant life in your health, wealth, and relationships, whatever that means to you, head on over to makemoremarbles.com. Check out our cool explainer video about what we're about, and join our community of entrepreneurial game changers. We want to help you level up your life in every possible way. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you're listening to your podcasts, and please do leave a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.